Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Technorama Tuesdays webinar series. And tonight we are talking about modernising your engagement, SMS, social media, and video. My name is Hannah Murray. I'm the Student Services and Compliance Officer here at the Community Media Training Organisation. I'm also the Board Secretary of Technorama, and I'm here to assist in all your technical queries throughout the night and fielding your questions. By the way, you can ask questions by dropping a question in the Q&A box down the bottom. You can also raise your hand during the sessions and I will allow you to ask your question in audio form. Before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples today. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. I'm going to introduce our wonderful Technorama representative for this evening, Trent Gettys, who will tell us all about the session and introduce our wonderful presenters. Over to you, Trent.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and thanks everyone for joining us for this Technorama Tuesday session. You know what, I think it is absolutely fabulous that we're having this kind of knowledge sharing in the community media sector, and we've had some great people step up and present some content which you can actually see from the website. But this evening is modernising your engagement. So, having a look at how people can interact with us and the tools that we can use and some use cases we'll also explore as well. We have Benjamin Erin, 8CCC. He's going to show you some of the tools that you can involve in your studio. Plus, we'll get some practical use cases from Stephen Stockwell and Tom Keast from 4CCC as well.
Great. Ben, Stephen, would you please magically appear? Oh, beautiful.
Oh, look at it.
Oh, it's all happening. Great. So to start things, Benjamin, can you tell us a bit about what's going on with your station and your engagement strategy?
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. First, I should acknowledge in my work at 8CCC that we broadcast in Alice Springs and Tennant Creek, which is Aranda country and Warramungu country. I've been in my role now at 8CCC in my fourth year now. And when I started at the station, there'd been a period where there were no staffing and it was a fully volunteer delivered station. Volunteering is still 100% core to what we do and how we realize our sort of vision of community involvement. So something that I'll touch on in this is capacity, because we've been trying to build our capacity. And some of the tools I'm showing are ways that we could extend the reach of things we were already doing and create some nice engagement. I'm going to share my screen to show you all a few bits and pieces. All right. So when I was approached to talk about this, the initial pitch was to have a bit of a chat about the text line. What you can see on the shared screen here is the broadcast launch interface, which is a platform that 8CCC signed up to about a year ago. It's developed by an Australian developer. I think with close ties to community radio, and it's actively being developed, which is a nice thing. So it has a number of features that are specific to our sector. But before I get into what it is, I guess I want to first say why. Why did we want a text line? And one of the answers to that is purely about interaction and engagement. A lot of our presenters would often make offhand comments of, oh, if anybody's listening, or to my one listener, they were sort of downplaying the notion that there was an audience. There were often nice exceptions to that, where someone would be recognized in the supermarket by the sound of their voice and other moments like that. But a text line was a way that we could create a tangible opportunity for interaction, along with things like having a good phone system for people to call in. And it also ties into social media. So we did a lot of research and we jumped on the Technorama Facebook forum, the community radio text page, to kind of see what other people had done in the past. And we found there were quite a lot of different solutions. We opted for broadcast launch because it had quite a few different integrations that were helpful for us. But first things first, we needed a number. And the number that we ended up with, you can see in the top right-hand corner of the screen, is 04 1021 8333. And 1021 is our frequency, which we share with Triple Z, which is a nice thing in this session. And 8333 sounds like 8CCC. We spent a lot of time debating about whether we should have 8222, which is actually the letter C, or whether we should have a sounds like. But we voted on the sounds like in the end. We had to do a lot of hunting through multiple telcos and service providers to find who had that number. We then signed up for the cheapest, month-by-month contract possible to secure it, and then ported it across to the service. So we thought that branding and connection was important, because this is something that our presenters are going to be putting out there a lot. If we look at the broadcast launch panel here, on the left-hand side are the text messages as they come in, and it's all browser-based, which we quite liked because it wasn't dependent on a handset. It was sort of something we could place on the computer that would be there all the time for our presenters. The other thing you'll note, though, is that in the middle of the screen, there's a Facebook feed, and there's also a email that can show. So as a sort of communications platform, it was a really nice solution that offered presenters a number of different ways to interact with the audience. If we come across here, this is where we get some of the analytics. And as I mentioned, it is a bit of a fully featured product that's been developed for community radio. So you can also do things like have your stream linked into it to get some data from the stream. I think they even have an option to auto-publish the songs that have been played to a Twitter account or other things like this. So we haven't fully taken advantage of all of those features, but definitely one of the nice things is you can plug your schedule into here. And if you're a presenter on air, down in the bottom left, our data is not up to date, but you can essentially see what show is on, what show is coming up, and it will give presenters a little reminder. So when we were investigating the option, this was a good solution for us that we could use in a number of ways. But I guess the key thing is coming back to the context of where we broadcast. We're in Alice Springs and Tennant Creek. Alice Springs has a population of 27,000 and Tennant Creek about 4,000. So our potential audience for our FM service is around the 30,000 mark. We web stream, and that's something that more and more we're getting engagement with, but there's going to be a different audience and a different potential for interaction compared to a metro station in a bigger area. We are just going to have a smaller listenership. And the reason I mention this is because having a service or putting something out there isn't enough. You've got to market it and engage people with it and make it relevant to what you do. So what we found is we have a number of programs that are really actively using the text SMS format as part of their show, and they create a feedback loop for the listeners where if someone texts in, they're acknowledging it quite quickly and weaving it into the program. And that the shows that do that successfully are the ones that get the most engagement. It creates a feedback loop that builds, and I do find that those presenters are really satisfied to have that engagement and interaction. So that was the sort of first thing I wanted to show you guys of something that we've implemented more recently to make sure that we do have good engagement and interaction with the community. In terms of social media more broadly, we've kind of been looking at what platforms are people on? What are they using? Where are they? And if you talk to a lot of young people today and ask them where their music collection is, you'll probably find it's on a streaming service like Spotify. So ACCC has been working to create playlists on Spotify for our presenters that are branded, that programs can share. It's just another way to be accessible to listeners in platforms where they are, and it brings them into our world. I think one of the core things about community radio is curation of content and that human touch. So this has been a way that we can continue that onto a different platform. And you can also then share those playlists, and it's a way for people to interact with the program formats. Coming across to our Instagram, ACCC, I mentioned before capacity. Currently, we have about 80 to 90 active volunteers, and then myself in a full-time role and a 0.2 1 day a week technical role. So we very much are dependent and reliant on our volunteers to generate a lot of our content, deliver our services across the organization. To be honest, a lot of this social media content I post and manage, and most of the content is produced on a mobile phone. So pretty much most of the video stuff that you'll see here is all very much in my pocket. And a lot of the stuff is just things that I grab really quickly. Whenever we have someone in the studio, I get a quick photo of them in the studio session, or a quick video of a live performance. I'm always just trying to grab those moments. It's things that we're already doing, but if we can really grab just a quick photo, flip it up onto a social platform, and even better, tag that person in it, it's a really good evidencing of the engagement that a lot of stations are already doing. And what I've found is that ramping up the volume of posts we do, specifically with the community interactions we have, has led to a real snowball. And we get a lot of positive feedback from people going, oh, wow, I've been following what you're doing, seeing what the activities are involved in. A lot of that is through social media. It also helps us to demonstrate to sector bodies, to funders, to potential business partners and sponsors that we're really vibrant, dynamic, and alive. So it's almost like a really easy to update resume of sort of what we're up to. If you have a look at our feed here, you'll see some of the recent content we've put up. And one of the topics of the session today was sort of video and new media. So with that in mind, I just want to share with you a little clip shot on my mobile phone from an event that we partnered with to broadcast and run the front of house sound. So this clip is not high quality production. We didn't have a crew behind it. We didn't have a budget. It's me and my mobile phone, and it's under a minute, so I can share it on Instagram without having to use their weird IGTV platform. It's got our brand in it in the bottom left corner, and it's humans doing human things, which humans love. So that's just a really quick turnaround example of some video content. And in our little comment, we've made sure to tag the artists. And this clip has gone on, this was put up one day ago, 217 views, and we've had a number of shares. Talking about capacity, we post to Instagram, but we have it linked to our Facebook account. So that one post will go out on both platforms. We've definitely found that we actually get more engagement on Instagram than we do on Facebook. And partly I think that's due to the way the algorithms are programmed and work. We get different sorts of interaction. I wish I had the capacity to curate for the different platforms, but I don't. But by linking the accounts, we can have a presence on both. So I will post to Instagram from a mobile device, sync it over to Facebook, and then really quickly jump onto Facebook and fix the tags. Tagging people and linking them in is really powerful because it lets people know that you're showcasing them if there's someone who's come in for an interview or some sort of engagement, a local artist, and they will then often share that. And that's where you have that amplified connection across social media. Some of the other things I want to show you are our use of audiograms. And I know this is something that CMTO have addressed in the past. An audiogram, I'll just quickly show you one more. We had some young students in the studio doing some performances. And again, you can see that we've tagged the local town council who are sponsoring this series of gigs, NT Music School. We've given a little write-up and context. And yeah, we've had some really nice engagement with that on both platforms. Again, the quality is not great. This is not the full production. This is something quick, easy, that we get up quickly to just show people what we're up to and doing. The other form I wanted to show you is a way of using Headliner, which is a software application, to create an audiogram. It's a way to turn audio announcement into a shareable video.
Aged 12 to 25 and want to be a champion for our planet? Join the Youth Climate Forum and become a Planeteer. Grow your superpowers in climate knowledge, environmental skills, and climate action over a series of 7 workshops. The first one is on Sunday, 18th of April from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Wichity's Araluen Arts Centre, and lunch is provided.
The great thing about this service is you can do subtitle transcriptions. The use of the waveform here creates motion, and it tells people that something's happening, so they're more likely to then turn on their audio if they've been reviewing it. You can see we have the sponsored partners here, and we're letting people know that we do community service announcements. This was something that we did as part of our commitment to community service and as part of developing a partnership with the Youth Action Group, a local crew. There's another one I'll show you here, which was actually part of a grant where ACCC pitched to do a series of community service announcements about environmental and waste issues. And it was a Northern Territory Government Department of Environment grant, which we've also published in a digital format.
My name is Diane Numberyan Stokes. I'm a Warramunga Warramunga woman of Tennant Creek.
Waste isn't just about plastic, bin collection, or your local dump. Waste management is a problem that affects us all.
Because of having a waste in our homelands, got a lot of creeks. When it rains, it just floods out, and it's everywhere. And like you can see today, it's a man-made dam. It was a big creek before, but we're caring for it. We know that it's a good place for our families to come, have picnics, sit down, swim, kids swim and families swim. And this is our home, the environment that we care for.
Help reduce waste on country by disposing of rubbish responsibly. This 8CCC radio announcement is brought to you by the Northern Territory Government.
So I played that through to the end so you could see our sponsor acknowledgement. And I think this sort of content is a really great way to extend the reach of community service announcements, sponsorship, and other things. It helps to demonstrate to people that you're partnering with to share messages for the community, what's happening. And we have had really great feedback. We've actually developed a bit of a fee-for-service model of doing vox pops and documenting community events and repackaging them as audiograms. So there's a number of different formats on Instagram. I keep them under a minute so they fit within the posting guidelines of that. And yeah, it keeps it nice and easy. This is Headliner. So this is the backline of that. And if we click into one of the projects, it's all a browser-based editor where you can drop in different assets along the bottom. So you can see we have a logo, we've got the waveform, down here is the background image and the audio. And it's a pretty simple linear editor that you can really quickly flip out a video format of an audio announcement. The other thing is if you're doing a low volume, it's a free service. The only time we've ever gone to a premium account was when we were doing that content production series. Here's our Facebook page. We recently, it won't animate for me, but we recently had a local animator update our page banner to an animation. So if you guys feel like it after, you can head over to 8CCC Radio on Facebook and check that out. It's definitely a nice feature that kind of, it elevates the page, having that motion built in and having a professional front end. We also have really consistent branding across the different platforms with our icons. This is our video page. Couldn't work out how to stop the messenger chats popping up, so don't mind them. And you can see here, we've got that video. This was what was posted on Instagram, pops across onto Facebook. 2 birds, 1 stone, if you will. Coming down, you can see we have longer format things. And this one here is what I wanted to show you, which is our local connection series. This is a proof of concept for a new visual radio format that we've been developing. We were successful in pitching for some arts funding to do a series of live stream performances of local bands. We also then invested in some new camera equipment for the studio and began developing a visual radio format of higher production value clips. So unlike the social media stuff, which is quick and dirty, get it up there, this is stuff where we're really working on having a polished, professional looking product. And the aim is that we can have local artists come in for a live to air performance that we broadcast. We live stream it to social media, to YouTube, and they walk out of there with a demo, with a recording, with those assets that they can then take and use for their promotion. It's sort of been part of us updating our website, where we're also ensuring we have accurate song history, which is being populated by automatic content recognition. So the playlists are through a Shazam-like service, which monitors our stream and allows people to interact with the playout and see who's been playing. We also have automatic on demand. So again, the stream is being automatically recorded and loaded up to the website. So we've got limited capacity, but once we set this up, it's able to create some great interactive shareable content that can extend the reach of our programming. Here is our homepage, and you can see we've embedded the video onto the homepage. And I'm just going to play you a brief moment of this. It's a teaser. If you want to see more, you're going to have to go check it out. Slow burn, slow build. That automation of the recordings for on demand is managed through Omni Studio. And the great thing about Omni Studio, it's sort of an enterprise podcasting platform. I know a number of other stations use it already. And you can, if you talk to the CBAA, there's some subsidized access to that through their new sort of cross-platform project, which I think had some CBF funding. They might come and talk about that more at another time. But it does also mean that you can have interviews or other audio content that's automatically recorded, repackaged into a format that you can share on your social media. And you can, again, interact with that through a web browser editor. I won't talk for too much longer, but I just, I guess, wanted to give you guys that little bit of an overview of some of the things we've rolled out. There's definitely a lot of considerations for us coming back to capacity in training people up to be able to actually take advantage of the new platforms that we've engaged with. And there's also considerations with social media around having an organizational voice. And when you have multiple people publishing under the same page, how do you manage that? What's appropriate? So we're actively developing both a style guide as well as a social media policy that helps to outline the scope of that. For us, we really do want to empower our presenters to manage their presence on social media. And by providing clear guidelines and structure around that, they can then be empowered to take a lead on that, which expands our capacity. There are, if we were to try and control it too much, we're actually limiting our ability to get content out there. So we have guidelines around publishing through the main program, but also a lot of shows will have their own social media platforms, which they link back to us by tagging and other things. So I think those are the main things I just wanted to show people quickly as a bit of an overview of some of the tools that we're using to extend the reach of things we're already doing and to turn them into a content that we can share online, that we can create interaction with, which benefits both our presenters, having that nice feedback loop, and also our audience. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. That's really interesting. And I think it's a great example of how even as a smaller station, you can still have a huge impact in your social media engagement, video engagement, and of course, your SMS as well. It sounds like it's really livened up your station.
It's definitely a challenge for us though. For example, we are not live 24 hours a day. So the poor person that texts into a pre-record isn't going to get a response. But this again comes down to whatever platform you have, you need to actively curate it and create that engagement. Yeah.
So going from sort of a more regional perspective and then going to something like 4ZZZ, Stephen, how do you kind of implement strategies with your SMS, social media, and video to appeal to your audience?
Yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of it is similar to what Ben's doing. Like, I think the principles and the approach is actually kind of translates reasonably well in a lot of senses. And I think a lot of the time, the reason that we're on these platforms is just because it's a new way of engaging with our audience and a new way of us keeping present. Like, it does make us look very present. I notice it when, certainly as a just as a listener more than a manager, through previous radiothons, and big sort of subscriber pushes, it gives us a presence and puts us front of mind for people when they're not necessarily listening to the radio. So if you've got a subscriber drive or you've got an event or something like that on that you're keen to kind of make sure is in front of people a lot, that can be a really good way basically of going about that and getting yourself in those kind of spaces and in their faces for those things. And the big thing that we try to keep in mind is more about kind of representing the various different voices and the various different communities that we cover. We have a huge community of volunteers at Triple Z. So, we're a bigger station than ACCC is, but we've got sort of 4 paid staff, a couple of grant funded staff, and 250 plus volunteers. And we're live most of the time. There's a couple of graveyard shifts that are pre-recorded content, but most of the time there's someone on the radio presenting a different show. So something that we need to keep in mind with that when we're looking at our social content and the engagement that we have on social media and the content we're posting to social media is making sure that we're representing all of those different communities and different people kind of evenly across the board, making sure that no one's left out, basically. So that's the kind of broad approach when we're looking at the social media that we're engaging with, or the social media we're using and the kind of tone we've got there. When it comes to, I guess, the SMS interaction, I won't talk as much about that, but I think it's a really good way of getting people just that live engagement on the program. There's a few programs that do have their own kind of Facebook pages and things like that they'll get a bit of engagement from, but most of the time that kind of engagement that we find in studio is coming through the SMS line. Less and less we're getting phone calls from people. It's also really handy for giveaways and things like that. Again, people are less and less likely to actually pick up the phone and call someone. They're much more likely to just be texting in. So that's the kind of benefit that we're using in those spaces. And while I think the off-the-shelf tech is probably the way to go for most stations, we've had a couple of people at our station kind of build a system around for us that is a bit more specific to our needs, and mostly is more of a pop-up window for certain text messages that are coming through. And that's technology we've expanded out. So when we're getting subscribers, for example, they get a pop-up window. People can elect to choose whether or not they want the on-air announcer notified, and they can give a shout out to the person who's just subscribed. So that's probably the key difference in the stuff that we're doing a bit differently. On the social media stuff, though, I think the most useful thing is to think a bit more about the platforms that you're using and what you're using them for. I think Facebook is a really strong platform for established communities. And we've got at Triple Z a couple of different communities that we have as our audience that I think about as our audience. So we've got kind of, in one sense, the kind of original Triple Zers. So these are the people who have been around since, for like 45, 40, maybe 35 years, been with the station for a long time, remember the station when it started and have sort of existed, stayed attached to it through that commitment. And Facebook's a really good place to reach them. That's a place they're really engaged on. And it's a place you can build a strong community around, because that community, that original Triple Z community, is reasonably cohesive, as cohesive as any sort of community radio audience is. That's probably the most cohesive one that we've got. So finding them on Facebook and communicating with them on Facebook is the easiest way to do. And one of the things that you've got the benefit of on Facebook is, groups and different communities and things like that. So there's a Z Folk community that's established and run by kind of pretty much any current and former Triple Z volunteers. So it's a really good way of kind of gauging feedback from, the broad sort of Z community, like people who've been involved in the station. We also use announcer and volunteer groups as well. So that's the active volunteers, a good way of communicating information to them. And then obviously we have our main Facebook page that we can sort of get stuff out to our broad community. Tom will talk a bit more about that when we come to sort of the Facebook live streaming, the video stuff we do a little bit later. But that's the kind of value of that audience. It's that sort of original community, a kind of deeper connection. It's really good at building that connection with people. It's a bit more individual. It's a bit more two-way. The other platform that we spend a bit of time on, probably that we spend most of our time on, is Instagram, because Instagram is where we've got a lot of our younger audience. So anyone who's come to the station in the last say 20 years or maybe 10 years, that's who we're finding on Instagram, and that's who we're talking to on Instagram. And that's a much younger audience to our core Triple Z audience, which would probably be, you know, the sort of the Facebook audience, I should say. But that younger audience is interested in different things. So they've got a much stronger interest in electronic music, for example. That's something we find goes really well there. Also progressive issues. So anything that we're doing around, you know, involving the LGBTIQ plus community usually goes really well on Instagram as well. We've got quite strong traction with that. First Nations issues as well. Anything we're talking about with that, First Nations bands, that stuff tends to go pretty well on our Instagram page as well. So that's something that we kind of think about with that. And with Twitter, we don't spend much time on Twitter at all. It's just not somewhere where we get much engagement of any, we don't get any engagement of value really through that platform. Not so much the radio station itself. For the newsroom, yeah, that's where that effort goes. So the newsroom is probably most active out of all of the social media platforms on Twitter, because it's a much more sort of news focused space, I suppose. We do still have a Twitter account that one of our volunteers and one of our board members runs and just sort of look after. We're happy for them to kind of to follow that and look after that, because it's not something that we feel like we need to focus a huge amount on at the station. So that's the thinking with those ones there. And that's like the way that I think the capacity stuff's really interesting with that Ben was talking about. I mean, a lot of our Instagram content, which is what our content is basically designed for. So when we're looking at socials, we're thinking Instagram first, and mostly it's a lot of cross posting to Facebook and then monitoring and updating and things like that there. We have, like I said, 4 paid staff, a couple of grant funded staff, and then 250 volunteers. So when we're looking at who's responsible for that, it's tempting to kind of open that up to everyone, so everyone can contribute and pile stuff on and get stuff posted all of the time. But the thing that I think a lot about, and Charlotte, who does our marketing, thinks a lot about, is the kind of the tone and the voice that we've got. So making sure that tone, that voice is quite consistent, and you know, is the same. People are getting a very similar product, so they're not looking at an Instagram, like they're not scrolling to their Instagram and they're getting totally different language or totally different style from post to post. It's very consistent messaging that they'll get through that space. At the moment, our Instagram has been run mostly by Charlotte, who does our marketing stuff, and we're actually looking at the moment of expanding that out to a couple of other volunteers who, you know, we think will be able to basically uphold that and like understand that tone, understand the importance of things like that. So one of those people is our interviews coordinator, Jazz. She's actually been working off her own Instagram page for a little while, which is great. She's been posting different interviews that are coming up around the station, but that's content that we would prefer to have on our main channel, because it's really aligned with it's aligned with all the programs we've got, and it can sort of build that brand a bit more. That tagging of people and sort of sharing that you get through Instagram is a really good way of expanding your reach, as Ben spoke about. And we want to kind of build one really strong Instagram account rather than one pretty strong Instagram account and then one slightly weaker Instagram account off to the side, or one much weaker Instagram account off to the side. It's, you know, our focus for this one is building that one space. But the risk you have if you're sharing that role around, and the reason we haven't done that before is because we weren't sure if it'd dilute that message and we'd start to lose a bit of that and the quality would drop and people would be less likely to engage and they might unfollow us. And that's really the kind of worst case scenario with that. Something we are looking at, if you're looking at kind of expanding your social reach out a bit more and you're trying to get several different people working across, you know, a couple of solid station accounts. You might have a Facebook account, an Instagram account, and a Twitter account, for example. We use a program called Later, which allows us to schedule content across, you know, all the social platforms that we're using, basically, which is a really handy way for, like, you know, let's say Jazz has just realized that there's an interview on tomorrow morning with a certain band. She can jump into Later and have a look to see if Charlotte already knew about that and has already scheduled a post about it. And if there's nothing in there, she can then schedule a post to go out that way. And it just means that everyone can see everyone can see through our Instagram what's up there, but it also means that we have that cohesion of, you know, people knowing what's coming up and not posting the same thing twice and not doubling up on content, because that again can just look a little bit, you know, just not ideal. It's not what you want your followers to kind of take away from your social presence. So that's really useful. We're in the process actually of just kind of like firming up our policy on announcers having Facebook pages and social media pages as well. So we're just reviewing that and seeing the best way about it, because we previously had a pretty open slather. I remember about sort of 10 years ago, it was basically all announcers were encouraged to have as many Facebook pages as they could. So we had announcers who had Facebook pages that were set up as personal accounts for their show pages, Facebook, communities or Facebook groups set up for their pages. And it was really quite a really widespread. Something that we are kind of more aware of now is the potential harm that could come to the Triple Z brand from people like those pages basically going out of control. We have no real oversight over them at all. We don't know logins for any of them. In a lot of cases, those pages have been around for ages, and those volunteers have now left the station and moved on to other stuff. So it's really, not, you get a lot of, there's a real risk there to the station. Nothing that's popped up and causes trouble yet, but it's just something that we're aware could potentially be a problem. So if you're looking at really opening up the social access to everyone, so encouraging people to get Facebook pages and things like that, making sure you got a clear policy around what isn't appropriate on them, requirements around, taking those pages down or taking associations down from with the station when those programs are no longer on the station is just stuff that's really worth having a bit of a think about and making sure you're across, because there's a great opportunity there. There's that great opportunity to build that capacity to really build the communities and spread that stuff around, but there is a risk involved in that as well. So that's something that we're kind of keeping our mind across the moment and making sure we don't kind of get caught out at any point. So it's just something worth considering when you're doing it. Probably a very low risk for most stations. Just something that as a metro station, we're getting more and more protective of the brand basically of 4ZZZ and want to make sure that that's, all the things we're doing are aligned with our values and that there's nothing that's not aligned with our values that's being done under our name basically. So that's the kind of thinking with that. The one social media platform that is probably just people are aware of and thinking a lot about at the moment, and I haven't talked about it all, is TikTok. We've had a couple of just like light-hearted chats about that around the office about who we would get to do that and how that might work. TikTok's a really interesting social media platform. I spend a lot of time on TikTok. It's very fun. But if you're a community radio station, you don't have a lot of capacity, TikTok's a lot of work to make really good stuff. And the return that you're likely to get from that probably isn't going to be worth the effort that you're putting in, because the videos can take quite a while to produce if you're not used to it. The tone can be very specific. It can be very easy to get wrong. So the risk is quite high with it. As we're looking at it and thinking about it, the way that we might approach it is just having an individual person take it and base it more around an individual rather than the station. So have them kind of taking people through the station, showing them what things are happening in there and those kind of products, rather than trying to have a broader sort of like, several contributor arrangement for that, because I think TikTok is something that works much better when you've got that one-off individual sort of personal connection with someone on there. So yeah, that's the kind of thinking around that. At the moment, I'm just going to check my notes to make sure there's nothing else I have forgotten with all of that. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. And I think the big thing is certainly with Instagram, and when you're looking at sharing stuff and building capacity around it, is just tagging people. I think that's a great way to get content shared around. We had, and Tom's going to talk a bit about, the stuff we were doing on Friday in the studio, but we had a couple of bands in the studio on Friday. When we had them in, we were taking photos of them that we post to Instagram. We tagged the bands in them, tagged the individuals in them in that. And that meant that all of those people were sharing that post through their Instagram stories, which meant that anyone who is a follower of those bands can jump on and see, and that's immediate, like, oh, what are they up to now? Oh, they're playing a live set at Triple Z. Oh, it's Triple Z. Oh, it's a community radio station. Oh, that's pretty cool. They've got another band. And you kind of bring people in that way. So that's the approach to, it's the value in that kind of tagging and sharing side of things. So yeah, really, really worthwhile. Instagram, certainly if you're looking at getting younger audiences in, is a platform that I would highly recommend. A thing to keep in mind with it as well is that, you are beholden to the algorithm. Something that, we noticed when I was talking to Charlotte this afternoon before coming to this, she was saying that pictures with faces and things like that go really well. That's why we get good engagement on. We share our album of the week on Instagram each week, and that's just a picture of some album art. That usually does okay. The photos that go really well though are people around the station, people who've come in for interviews, all that kind of thing, because the algorithm will recognize faces and push pictures with faces further up into people's feeds, so you get a bit more engagement from that, and they'll spread a bit wider. So yeah, that's the kind of broad social approach that we're taking at Triple Z. Tom, do you want to talk us through some of the video stuff and our approach to video as well?
Oh yeah, so yeah, I'm Tom. I have been working on the live streams at 4ZZZ for the past couple of years now, particularly right here, right now. Yeah, and so in the past, we've just used a phone connected to a little MIDI that brings audio in off the console to stream our videos. We usually post it with a little piece about the artist and who's performing. For the previous stream on Friday, I tried to use a multicam setup, which I was really excited about. Yeah, I had acquired an ADAM Mini, which I can plug in a couple of cameras to, and streaming that to Facebook just to make it more interesting for the audience to watching at home. Yeah. So you might be wanting to live stream across to multiple platforms of social media, and that can be quite tricky. A webcam can only access one social media platform at a time on a laptop. So the workaround is using OBS and then a third-party web host that basically sends your stream to multiple platforms at once. I actually don't remember off the top of my head what the third-party websites are, but yeah, that's how you go about doing that. Anyway, yeah, that's sort of my bit. Yeah, just yeah. Oh, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, so this is what I posted. And yeah, the little device is really cool because we can put a little logo in the corner during the live stream, and yeah. Yeah, fantastic.
Yes, no. Yes, I'm back. Great. So yeah, as you can see, this is the stuff that that Tom was putting up on Friday night. So there's the multicam switching between a couple of cameras, which is great. And Tom, what's the kind of thinking around, like, this is the stuff that's gone live to where, what's the process when you're filming this stuff of also putting it on other platforms? Is this going in other places as well, and something that you're looking
so at? Right now, we're only really putting it towards YouTube after the fact, once the live mixes come back to me or whoever's editing the video. Yeah, but it'd be really cool to get this out to like an Instagram live stream. I think that's Instagram TV as well as Facebook simultaneously. And maybe maybe even a YouTube live stream, I think.
Yeah, so there's a few different options when you're doing live video like this that you can actually get it to a whole bunch of different places, basically. So yeah, this is at the moment, yeah, this is it's a live that pumps up on Facebook, and then it goes YouTube after the fact. Some of the other stuff that Tom's been working on as well have been these. There we go. I'll come back here. I'm just going to stop that as well because that is really distracting that they're playing in the other corner. There's also some kind of highlight videos and highlight reels from gigs around the place that we're going to, and Zed's been involved with. So there was one from a really quite significant local band, Blowhard. They had a final show a couple of weeks ago, and Tom went along and basically filmed a bunch of highlights and did a bunch of filming and produced a highlights reel from that, which is great. And one of the things that we're looking at with some of those things as well is the opportunity for including them in our sponsorship deals and things like that. So there's a possibility with some of these things that you can actually make include them in sponsorship packages. What we're probably going to be doing in our first instance is, when we've got events that are sponsored by various organizations and sponsors of 4ZZZ, we can produce these videos because we're producing them anyway, and just sort of show, hey, look, this is something that you were a sponsor of, we produced a video of, we've included you in the video as part of that. And then when we come back to, when Dominique, who's our sponsorships coordinator, comes back to kind of renegotiating some of those deals, that's something that we can then go, hey, look, so did you like those socials videos? Like, was that useful for you? And we can look at trying to bring in a bit more money for ZZZ to basically better fund all of these things into the future. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities with this sort of stuff, basically.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, both of you. That's really interesting stuff. If I could bring Ben back, that would be great. Hopefully he's there. If he's not, that's fine. I have some questions regarding your video content, if you don't mind. In terms of actually live streaming an event, how do you go with the permissions for the music use? Or, if someone records something in their studio and they're playing a track, how does the station mitigate that?
So my read of it, I had a quick chat with a few people around this today, is that because with our broadcast license, we're covered for broadcast content off the back of that. And because this is basically covered under our broadcast license, we can work through that as well. So that's the process for that. Certainly with some things being, some after the fact stuff, I'm pretty sure, and Charlotte, who's more across this, is actually presenting a program right now, so I can't be here. I think potentially some other rights clearances involved with that, but I think your best bet with it is double check it all. When you've got people, like when we have artists coming in for Right Here, Right Now, for example, we've got them working through, we have them sort of signing it, like basically agreeing to being in the studio, kind of like telling us what gear they need, what requirements they've got, all that sort of stuff. So having a line in there is really straightforward. So when you've got events like this going on and you've got artists coming into broadcast, just putting a note saying I consent to this being, republished through these means is fine. Was what you should be doing. Yeah.
Great.
With that, on our end, we've developed some contract templates for specific formats. So I mentioned the Territory Arts project, which was that more highly produced live stream we had. That's part of a project of 12 live streams that will be cut into videos, with a digital album release at the end. So there's quite a little bit involved in terms of the music licensing side. So we consulted directly with APRA AMCOS, with Arts Law, and then found some model templates we were able to adjust. And then for more off-the-shelf sort of stuff, we also do a lot of recording of live gigs and events, which we like to then cut up to help support our local music targets. So we've developed just sort of a one-pager consent sheet that just articulates what we're doing and where it's going to go. With the other thing I might just note is we mentioned podcast series before. So for our online content, APRA AMCOS offer mini licenses, which support streaming directly from your website. However, the limitation comes when you're then publishing to external podcasting platforms. I believe YouTube have their own licensing arrangements with APRA AMCOS. But for podcasts, the content that we're developing specifically for that format, some of those we've pitched for Community Broadcasting Foundation content funding, and we include an allotment for music licensing, and we license use of music from local unsigned artists who control their own copyright. And we have had instances, for instance, Karma Music or Music NT, who run different projects and have recordings of Desert Divas or other artists. They've been happy to waive their part of the copyright thing. It's quite convoluted and complicated, and the best thing to do is, if you've got any queries, you can call up, I think Felicity is a lady at APRA AMCOS who manages the community radio licensing side, and they're always happy to have a yarn about some of that stuff.
What a hot tip. Felicity from APRA AMCOS is going to get so many calls now. Sorry, Felicity. Cool. We've got a question from Paul Elliott. Do the panelists and attendees have stats they can share about how many people listen online compared to listening on radio?
I've got some screen. I can actually share screen. I saw that question earlier and pulled up a few things. So let me just do that. Is that all up for everyone?
Yep.
Cool. So the first thing I should flag is we're in a really small regional community. So we don't have highly localized data about our FM listenership. And one thing that's really relevant about that to the conversation we've had today is if you're approaching a potential sponsor or partner and they ask how many people listen, if you're in a regional area, it can be hard to give a solid answer to that. But something that you can demonstrate is take them to your Facebook page and show them the community engagement you have on your social media, show them all the events you've been at. So having that strong social media account that shows community interaction and engagement can be a really powerful tool when you're articulating the reach and engagement you have with an audience. But if we have a look at this page, this is from the CBAA's National Listener Survey from 2019. So if we look at weekly in regional Northern Territory, 26,000 people on average would listen to community radio. So we've just moved to a new streaming service, which is Triton, who have some more analytics. So slightly less impressive sounding figures. If you guys can see there, this is a weekly reporting period, and we've got the number of connections, the duration or hours, and the peak users. We peaked out at 14 at once. Excellent. But this is one period, and what we found again is that it's quite specific to, if we're doing a particular event and we promote that this is happening, people tune in. For example, I showed you guys a clip from a live music performance that we were involved in from the weekend. Two of our performers had their mums listening in from interstate over the web stream. And they both posted about that on their social media, saying how nice it was that they could stay connected to family over the web stream. So sometimes the value isn't just numbers. And then I guess on that topic of analytics, here's our Facebook. So Facebook and Instagram reach are both articulated here. So you can see that, for ACCC, there's a higher reach on Facebook to Instagram. And then you've got the more specific post-specific sort of reach. And what was really cool, I haven't poked around here for a little while, but was just looking at some of the gender balance. So on Instagram, we have a lot more interaction with women, and you can also see the age groups. So for us, it looks like across Instagram and Facebook, our kind of core listener group is that sort of 25 to 44 bracket, which is pretty consistent with other sort of information and stuff. I guess we've got the live stream, but we also have the on-demand. So this, I just had a quick look and found this then as well. So Omni Studios, which is the platform that manages the on-demand and kind of podcasting clip stuff, has some data in it as well. So this is a week-long period. And we've got the data by program down here. So our breakfast show, which is a format delivered by someone living with a disability, with some support, to do a Monday to Friday breakfast show with lots of interviews with politicians, musicians, artists. And I would suggest that the reason that's probably getting the most downloads is it's people who are like, hey, I was on the radio the other day. Do you want to have a listen? Which comes back to that notion of interaction and how having a connection with the audience is what will expand reach. So anyway, I thought I'd just show people that. Oh, and the other thing, policy. We all love policy. This is our presenter policy. This one is due for an update, but it does have a section on social media. And I thought this was relevant to the discussion earlier. This particular point, if a presenter does, like, it's all very soft language, we need to harden it up. But that if someone does have an independent Facebook platform, that the station manager or staff member is also added as an administrator as a way to maintain that organizational control. So that's an example of trying to implement a policy to both allow people out there, but provide some boundaries as well. But we definitely have lots of work to do on that. So anyway, I hope that's a little bit of an overview of some of the metrics that we have access to. I'll hand it over to you guys.
Cool. I hope that answered your question, Paul. If you've got any other questions, by the way, please either pop them in the Q&A below, or if you'd like to ask it via microphone, we have that capacity. Just use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen, and I'll be able to enable your microphone. You can ask it directly to the panel. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for questions, Tom, would you be able to tell us what kind of filming equipment you're using? So I know that you're using a phone, but do you have any other video infrastructure that you're using for your video content?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I used a multicam switcher, this ATEM Mini, and that has some HDMI outputs. So I've connected that to a Sony Handycam because I really like the zooms on the Handycams over DSLRs, but then the other camera is a DSLR. And yeah, I try to use a wide prime lens because we're sort of shooting in a kind of low light condition, but not really. And yeah, that's what I'm using. And then my laptop as well. Because that device just plugs straight in.
Great. Ben, I know that you've got cameras at ACCC as well that you showed me one today, actually. Do you have your little camera, for example, at home? You're muted, by the way, also.
No, I didn't bring my camera home. So ACCC, when we started developing the visual radio format, we did a little bit of research and we were looking at the Blackmagic ATEM route. And the other option we were investigating is a new type of digital video format called NDI. It's similar to Dante, which is audio over IP. NDI is video over IP. And one of the reasons we were intrigued by it is there's cameras made by an Australian developer called BirdDog, which have an NDI chip built in, and they're a pan-tilt zoom camera, which a single operator can move to different presets and control. So we invested in 3 of these. They're 1080 kind of HD cameras, and you can power them and get all of your video over a single Ethernet cable. So because we have relatively limited resources, it means that we can do a multi-camera switched production with a single human emulating what would normally be possible would require many more people. It's not that we don't want to employ people or engage people, and we still need camera and video technicians to help to color balance and do these sorts of things. But it was sort of a way for us to deliver a high quality production with limited human capacity. And we're using a software-based solution, which is vMix, which allows you to route that in and do that. The reason they're not here is ACCC's been invited by First Nations Media Australia to assist with the live streaming from the Converge conference. So we've been workshopping and using these cameras to support interactive webinars and workshops where remote participants can come in and talk to people while we also have a display in the room and push things out. So it's sort of opened up some other opportunities for us to increase interaction on top of content production, as well as creating sort of interactive remote realities, which ties into sort of value-aligned fee-for-service work that we can then do as part of a social enterprise. Yeah.
Great. What a very thorough answer. Thank you so much, Ben. For stations that haven't got a huge budget, would you be able to talk about, what it would be, what's the expectation for setting up some sort of video infrastructure at the station? So I think both of you would be able to answer that, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, our stuff isn't like, we don't have a super expensive kit. I mean, we're relying on a lot of Tom's gear, basically, for what we're working on. But I was actually talking to Tom today. I've got an old Canon DSLR that I don't use very much. And that was, that'd be worth, probably wouldn't even get $50 for it now. So potentially that's something you could use. I mean, I think a mobile phone is fine. Like, your camera on any kind of recent mobile phone is pretty good. And as long as, if you've got, like, depending on what you're doing, getting it in some kind of cradle or tripod so it can be steady for it is probably a reasonable way about it. Tom, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, just invest your money in a good light for anything to do with video. Yeah, because you can get away with pretty much any camera as long as the lighting is good. Yeah, that's yeah. And then yeah, make sure the audio is good, but we're radio, so it should be pristine.
Should hope so. We've got sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say our proof of concept stuff that we did was using just an off-the-shelf basic webcam and OBS software, which is a free open source vision mixing software that you can download tonight and play with. And there's even some apps you can plug in, so you can connect your phone via a camera as a camera input for that with your webcam. So yeah, it's stuff that you may already have in the house that you could be up and running, experimenting quite quickly.
Great. Scott has asked, what are some suggestions for relatively low budget cost for an SMS interacting service?
I'm going to throw this one at you, Ben, because I have not looked into this at all.
Sure. So when we did our investigations, one of the factors of securing a number was that we had to take out a plan to get the number from a provider. So that was a cost of, I think, the cheapest month-by-month prepay thing. Oh, I think it had to be postpay actually to secure it, was like $45. That got us the number. With broadcast launch, I guess we were looking at the option of having to set up some sort of infrastructure ourselves, which might, I know some stations will have a mobile phone in the studio on a bit of foam, so if it vibrates, it doesn't go through the mics. But we had a really great experience talking with the developers of Broadcast Launch. They offer a not-for-profit community radio pricing, and it costs us $15 a month for unlimited. There's also the ability to text back to people, which we use sometimes if there's sort of a giveaway context. And yeah, so for us, that cost for the value seemed pretty good value. Yeah. And then other than that, it would be having to deal with Telstra or another telco, and yeah, we didn't want to do that.
Fantastic. Okay, it looks like we've gotten to the end of the questions. If anyone has literally anything else they would like to say or ask, now is your time while we have these fabulous panelists here to answer your questions. But in lieu of that, it is 7:34 in Sydney, that is. And, oh, we have gotten a few more questions, sorry. Penny has asked, is a website non-negotiable?
I don't think anything's non-negotiable. It depends what you want, really. I think, yeah, if you're a small station, you don't have a huge reach. Maybe a Facebook page is enough. Like if you want to stream your content, I think that's where if you want to stream content online, that's where a website comes in handy, because it gives you that functionality. It gives you somewhere to send people. But yeah, it depends what you are and what you need. I certainly wouldn't say that you have to have one. You're potentially going to get more engagement through something like Facebook or Instagram than you will through a website. Just depends a lot on what content you want to make available, really, and if you want to stream.
The only thing I'd say about that, sorry to interrupt, is that much like what happened the other day with the news channels, where Facebook just wiped out half of the community radio stations' Facebook feeds, I would recommend that you have your own platform that is yours, because Facebook and Instagram are great, but we don't own that, and they can give it and they can take it away. So that's something to think on.
The last thing I might just add on that topic is websites can be incredibly complex, complicated things that are difficult to maintain, or it can just be a bookmark. It can be a business card online. But another thing to consider is if you get one set up, there are some great plugins that will actually pipe your social media content to your homepage, and that will keep it looking up to date and fresh. I think there's nothing more depressing than an out-of-date website, and often we can struggle to keep on top of it. But if you have a basic website with your social media there, often you can keep that up really easily and have something that's vibrant and dynamic without having to be managing multiple platforms excessively.
Great. All right, if there's no more questions, I would like to adjourn this webinar and say a big thank you to our wonderful presenters for this evening, Benjamin Aaron from 8CCC in Alice Springs, Tennant Creek, Stephen Stockwell and Tom Keast from 4ZZZ up in Brizzy. And of course, Trent, who is floating around in the ether somewhere. There he is. Our Technorama representative. Make sure that when you finish up with us tonight, that you fill out our feedback form that pops up after the webinar. It's integral to us knowing what is useful to you, what you want to know more of, what's going on at your station, and how much you enjoyed the presentations for the night. Also, please join the Technorama Q&A page. Trent, I will hand over to you to tell people more about that.
Yes, be sure to continue these kind of discussions, because, the thoughts are in the mind about how you can change your setups, and the questions like, how much money you might have to invest in it. And all these wonderful brains are a part of this sort of community. So you can search for Community Radio Tech Q&A on Facebook and join the community and, ask any questions, or you might even be able to contribute to some as well. We're also on, Facebook with a general page as well. You can search Technorama Australia and Technorama_Oz on Twitter if you do Twitter as well. And don't forget the fact that we, continue this webinar series next month. And we're looking forward to the conversation about breaking down the communication barriers between technical teams and management in community media, so we can all work in harmony. I mean, most of us are, spending our spare time doing this sort of thing. So, we really want to get on and you know, work towards that one passion of having a great community radio station. And Ren Cuttress and Cameron Payne are going to be presenting that session. So you'll be able to register for that one soon. And of course, if you're signed up as a member and also you get our newsletters, you'll be able to keep up and apprise of the information as well. Becoming a member, it's very affordable as well. It'll cost you $10 and you can be a part of our wonderful association, keep up to date with everything that is going on, and you also get some great little discounts, like discounts to our conferences as well. So it doesn't cost all that much, and it supports you know, a great little community that's doing things like this and presenting great webinars. And you know, we've got to thank everybody who's been involved in this stuff so far. It's amazing. You know, all this stuff has been able to come together, and you know, we're all sharing knowledge that we have, and you know, enlightening those that don't know, or even, you know, adding to those of us that have got something but could do with a little bit more to, you know, finish off our repertoire.
Fabulous. I couldn't have said it better myself, Trent. What a fabulous radio voice you have.
There's a few years in the radio game.
Indeed.
Good fun.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you for next week's Technorama webinar, which is Talking Tech to Your Board. And of course, last Tuesday of the month. And bye for now, but not forever. And thank you once again to everyone for coming and presenting. See you later.